Now, I will discuss to you about environmental policies. Over the years, a variety of principles have been developed to help policymakers. Example of such guiding principles, some of which have acquired a legal basis in some countries, are the polluters pays principles, which makes polluters liable for the cost of environmental damage. The precautional principle, which states that an activity is not allowed when there is a chance that the consequences are irreversible. Such straightforward guiding principles do not work in all situations. For example, some environmental challenges, such as global warming, illuminate the need to view Earth as an ecosystem consisting of various subsystems, which, once disrupted, can lead to rapid changes that are beyond human control. Getting polluters to pay or the sudden adoption of the precautionary principle by all countries would not necessarily roll back the damage already imparted to the biosphere, though it would reduce future damage. Since the earlier 1970s, environmental policies have made a shift from end-of-pipe solution to prevention and control. Such solutions rely on the mitigation of negative effects. In addition, if a negative effect was unavoidable, it could be compensated for by investing in nature in other places that where damage was caused, for example. So a third solution, which develops policies that focus on adapting the living environment to change, is also possible. More specifically, measures that strengthen an ecosystem's ecological resilience. An ecosystem ability to maintain its normal patterns of nutrients, cycling, and biomass production, combined with measures that emphasize prevention and mitigation, have been used. One such example is in Curitiba, Brazil, a city where some districts flood each year. The residents of flood-prone districts were located to higher and drier places, and their former living areas were transformed into parks that could be flooded without disrupting city life. So now, what is environmental policy? Environmental policy refers to the commitment of an organization to the laws, regulations, and often policy mechanism concerning environmental issues. These issues generally include air and water pollution, solid waste management, biodiversity, ecosystem management, maintenance of biodiversity, the protection of natural resources, wildlife, and endangered species, or any measure by a government or corporation or other public or private organization regarding the effects of human activities on the environment, particularly those measures that are designed to prevent or reduce harmful effects of human activities on ecosystems. So let's proceed to environmental policy instruments. Numerous instruments have been developed to influence the behavior of actors who contribute to environmental problems. Traditionally, public policy theories have focused on regulation, financial incentives, and information as the tools of government. However, new policy instruments such as performance requirements and tradable permits have been used. So first, we have regulation. Regulation is used to impose minimum requirements for environmental quality. Such interventions aim to encourage or discourage specific activities and their effects involving particular emissions, particular inputs into the environment, such as specific hazardous substances, ambient concentrations of chemicals, risk and damages, and exposure. Often permits have to be acquired for those activities, and the permits have to be renewed periodically. In many cases, local and regional governments are the issuing and controlling authorities. However, more specialized or potentially hazardous activities, such as industrial plants treating dangerous chemical substances or nuclear power stations using radioactive fuel roads, are more likely to be controlled by a federal or national authority. Regulation is an effective means to prescribe and control behavior. Detailed environmental regulations have resulted in a considerable improvement in the quality of air, water, and land since the early 1970s. The strengths of regulation are that it is generally binding. It includes all actors who wants to undertake an activity described in the regulations, and it treats them in the same framework. Regulations are also rigid. They are difficult to change. That can be considered as a strength, since rigidity ensures that regulations will not change too suddenly. However, rigidity can also be considered a weakness because it slows down innovation as actors seek to stay within the letter of the law rather than creating new technologies, such as more efficient emission scrubbers on smokestacks that would remove more pollution than what the regulation mandates. When regulations demand standards that are difficult or impossible to meet because of a lack of knowledge, skills, or finances on the part of the actors, or mismanagement by policymakers, regulations will not be effective. So the second one is financial incentives. Governments can decide to stimulate behavioral change by giving positive or negative financial incentives. For example, through subsidies, tax discounts, or fines and tax discounts. Such incentives can play an important role in boosting innovation and in the diffusion and adoption of innovations. For example, in Germany, the widespread subsidizing of solar energy systems for private homeowners, increasing the large-scale adoption of photovoltaic panels. Financial incentives or disincentives can also stimulate professional actors to change. A potential drawback of financial incentives is that they distort the market. When not used for a limited period, they can make receivers dependent upon the subsidy. A final drawback is that subsidies are expensive instruments, especially when they are open-ended. The third one, environmental reporting and eco-labeling. They are several instruments that aim to inform decision makers about the environmental effects of their actions. Decisions are usually based on a cost-benefit analysis, of which environmental costs and benefits are not part. The environmental impact assessments is an instrument that helps public decision makers to decide on initiatives with a certain environmental impact, such as the construction of roads and industrial plants. The environmental impact assessments has become a legal requirement in many countries. It requires the environmental effects of a project such as a building of a dam or shopping mall be studied, and that the actors be informed of how to mitigate environmental damage and what compensation they could receive for doing so. Environmental impact assessments allow decision makers to include environmental information in a cost-benefit analysis. Although all environmental impact assessments cannot stop initiatives from taking place, they can reduce the negative environmental impact. So the last one is eco-labels and certificates applied to specific products and services inform consumers about their environmental performance. Sometimes governments require such labels and certificates, such as the EU Eco-Label marking in Europe, which certifies that a product has met minimum requirements for consumer safety, health, and environmental friendliness. To push organizations to develop products and services that perform beyond those minimum requirements, they are labels that specifically express the environmental friendliness of the product or service. For example, the Energy Star rating in the United States indicates the energy performance level of household appliances. Eco-labels are often applied in the food industry, such as for certified organic or fair trade certified products, and for energy performance in building LEED standards. The underlying assumption of eco-labeling is that informed consumers buying environmentally responsible products will stimulate industry to innovate and product cleaner products. So that's all.